Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for joining, for watching, and for listening. I grew up in a city in Canada called Kitchener, Ontario. It's about an hour today, almost an hour and a half west of Toronto. There, as I've mentioned in the past, my father was a rabbi for 36 years until he passed away in 1989, and therefore my mother was a Rebbitzin. We were an Orthodox family, pretty much the only Orthodox Jewish family in Kitchener at that time. And our community was made up of about, I think at max around 250 families. It was a unique upbringing. And in many ways, it was magical. And I say that because if anything needed to get done, you had to do it. It was either our family or it was volunteers from the shul, Beth Jacob Synagogue, which still stands today. And that sense of camaraderie and unity that happened because of shared tasks, because of everybody attending the synagogue, in particular on the high holidays, on Passover, the major Jewish holidays, really created a very special bond. So small Jewish communities or smaller Jewish communities have always held a very special place in my heart because I know what is required of a Jew in Kamloops, in Fredericton, in St. Catharines versus Toronto, where there are close to 200,000 Jews. Here you can get lost if you want. You can find yourself in one of the 150 or so shuls, synagogues, and temples. And there's a lot of place for movement. If you're kosher-like, all kinds of restaurants and so on. That's a different sort of situation than what we're going to speak about today. And to me, that's very exciting. It's people standing up saying, I am a Jew. I live in a smaller town or smaller city in Canada, and I am going to be part of leadership and strengthening the Jewish people and growing the Jewish people. So let me now introduce to you my guests. And this is going from Eastern Canada to Central Canada to or Western Canada. I'd like to introduce to you first Marilyn Kaufman from Fredericton, New Brunswick. How are you, Marilyn?
Very well. How are you, Avrum?
I'm great. And it's so nice to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
We'll talk about your community in a moment. Howard Slepkov from St. Catharines, Ontario. How are you, Howard?
I'm great, thank you, Avrum. How are you?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, like they say,
Yeah.
right? I'm very well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for...
And finally, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. And finally, Heidi Coleman from Kamloops, BC. How are you today, Heidi?
Great. Just, 3 hours earlier or probably a little bit more for New Brunswick, but everything's good.
Everything's good. Good. You have a lovely smile, too. First thing I want to do is I want to thank my dear friend, Perry Rombor, the Jewish Federation United Israel Appeal, who helped put this group together. I'm very grateful. He does amazing work across Canada, and he's really one of those Jewish leaders that should be thanked for I think the effort that he puts in to bringing together smaller Jewish communities across our nation. A little bit about Canada and the communities we're talking about in terms of the Jewish community. Canada has close to 400,000 Jews. It's a little bit short of that, about 380,000. The Canadian Jewish population grew 4.8% since 2011, 2021. The larger Jewish communities can be found in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, and Ottawa. Smaller Jewish communities represent about 13.4% of the overall Canadian Jewish community. And let's talk about our specific cities here today and representatives. Kamloops has, according to the 2021 census, 315 Jews. That's compared to 275 in 2011, and it's about 15% of the overall population. Catharines has 1,710 Jews as of the 2021 census. In 2011, there were 75, so it's growing. Fredericton has 450, according to that same census. In 2011, they had 250. So we're seeing some growth with all of these communities, and that will be a very interesting thing to determine later on as to why that is happening. So I'd like to start in BC with Heidi. Heidi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born in Montreal to parents who were born in Montreal, but our grandparents came from Poland and Russia, and grew up in what we call Côte Saint Luc, went to a high school that was predominantly Jewish, and went to synagogue, had the whole Montreal Jewish experience. Still have a lot of family and friends there, and then decided to just change my life a little bit, have a different challenge, and moved out west. I do hospital fundraising. I'd worked at the Montreal Children's. I was vice president of the Jewish General Hospital Foundation. So that's my passion, healthcare. And I was very involved in Canadian Zionist Federation, taking kids to Israel, working with the Sochnut, went to Camp Gesher, Habonim. I think it was that kind of a typical upbringing that I connect well with, someone who's had similar upbringing. And then we lived through the PQ coming in and about 100,000 Jews, going to Toronto. I was married before to a Jewish Moroccan guy, Simon Ben Simon, who's very involved. Now he works for Ben Gurion University. We're still pretty close. And so it was great. And then when I moved out here, to get a job working at the only hospital in town, which is great, right? So if you're fundraising in Montreal, you have a little competition, but here we're the only hospital in the interior. And I had to find the Jewish people. So I heard about them. I saw this kind of website and went down to the river one day. It sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song. I went down to the river. But I went down to the river because it was Yom Kippur, and that's where I was told we could find them. And I was with my young son, who was 8 at the time. And I met Tom Friedman, who was a professor at TRU, Thompson Rivers University. And they welcomed me and then asked if I would be president. And it was almost like, we've done this for years. Yeah. It's someone else who came from Montreal, speaks Hebrew, has been to Israel, you be the president. And, and I've been president for a long time. And we have to do, like, I'm sure what a small community that doesn't have a synagogue has to do, organize the community, meet in people's houses. Of course, Kelowna is not very far. They have a Chabad and a big synagogue, and we do a lot of activities with them. But
let's stop there for a moment.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to cover. And
okay.
And I know that, like I said before, if you are part of a smaller Jewish community, then you're involved in a big way. Just a little bit about Kamloops. It's where they say the North and the South Thompson River meets. There are about 103,000 people there. Do you know the area codes, the 3 area codes there?
I know V2C2T1, V2C2W3, and I'm not sure what the third one is. Yeah, there's got to be... the postal, sorry, 250, the area codes, 236-778. Did I miss one?
And 672.
672.
Yeah, now Kamloops is said to be the tournament capital of Canada, hosting over 100 sporting tournaments each year. It has rugged natural beauty, 100 lakes, trails, and the name Kamloops comes from Sekwapemik, meaning meeting of the rivers. It's a beautiful province and a beautiful city. Let's move to central Canada. Howard, once again, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. Tell us about yourself. and how you arrived in St. Catharines and the leadership position you took on.
Well, I arrived in St. Catharines as the third generation of member of the community. My grandparents came from Toronto. My Zeta always said he left Toronto, which is where they landed when they came to the Golden and Medina.
Yes.
They left Toronto because he had a small gift shop, and he was tired of trying to make a living from the Jewish people. And he learned about a dress shop that was for sale through the husband of a first cousin, and he moved to St. Catharines. At that time, my father was a baby, and we've been in St. Catharines ever since. My grandfather was the Hever Kadisha. By the time my father was married, there were the baby boomers, and business was booming, and there were all kinds of families in St. Catharines. And then I have been involved in the Jewish world since the time I was old enough to know. Being involved in Young Judea brought me in contact with kids in all the small communities across Canada, because that was a very active Jewish youth movement. And I have friends still all across Canada. But from the time I got married, I have been a member of the Board of Governors of the synagogue. I'm on my second round of presidency. I have done everything except being treasurer, because that is something I have lots of skills, but being the treasurer is not one of them. Fortunately, we've always been able to
Me too.
find. And we have just literally finished a renovation of our 100-year-old sanctuary, and the synagogue has been recognized by the city of St. Catharines as an historical site just this year. And we complete our 100th anniversary the weekend of June the 20th to the 22nd. I have been intimately involved, and this is sort of like the crowning achievement to be able to
Good for you.
accomplish.
We should mention the name of the show, B'nai Israel Congregation. Congratulations on that. And you also sent me the, I guess, the program that goes along with the entire year celebration, and you did an outstanding job of that. So thank you
Well,
so much.
I can't take credit for all of that. I did the writing, but I had a fantastic helper in the office who was a great graphic artist, and the fundraising was all done by another group of people. But we raised enough money through that, and the gala we had a gala concert. We raised enough money to kick off the renovations.
Cool. Let's mention as many names as we possibly can throughout this. I want to give all kinds of people honor and kavod. So who was the graphic artist, Howard?
Serge Tricky. He sits in our
Okay.
office. He's the voice at the telephone behind the telephone number, and he's
I'll
fantastic.
give the shul a call. By the way, about St. Catharines, it's the most populous city in the Niagara region. It's the 8th largest urban area in the province of Ontario. There are about 144,000 people who live there. It's very much of a collegiate town. You'll find Brock University, Niagara College, Ontario Street Site, and it's most popular for the annual Royal Canadian Henley Regatta. So St. Catharines is a very, very lovely place, and it's well worth visiting. Yes.
Correct. A statement. There are almost 1,700 Jews in the Niagara Peninsula who define themselves as Jewish. We do not have that many people who identify. Most of the growth has been in people who do not want to identify. We have about 135 families, so we have maybe 350 who identify. The rest.
Got it. And I think that's indigenous, that's local to a lot of communities I know, as an example, I mentioned before, I come from Kitchener, Waterloo, and there's actually quite a large Jewish community there, in particular university professors and so on. But most of them are not identifying. And there's a very large Israeli community there as well. Let's head out east to Marilyn Kaufman. How are you, Marilyn?
I'm very well, thank you. Pleasure to be here with you.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in Fredericton and part of the Jewish community.
I was born in Fredericton, and I've lived here all my life. I met my husband on a blind date, and 50 years later, we're still together.
Muzzle tough. Muzzle tough.
And he's from Montreal. So Heidi mentioned the FLQ, and when that crisis broke out, he looked eastward with the job with the government. He was an accountant by profession, and decided that there was no future in Quebec, and he came east as opposed to going west to Ontario. A 5-minute walk to work from where you lived was very attractive. We have 4 seasons of the year that we celebrate. Fredericton's often called like a mini Ottawa, so to speak, because the structure is very similar. I grew up in a Zionist household. My parents were both Canadian born, grandparents from Belarus, Minsk area. I was 3rd generation. My grandchildren are 5th generation. And we had 7.5 hours of Hebrew school every day after regular school starting in grade 2. We used to comment on the Catholic students going on Friday afternoons to catechism. They just had like a one afternoon affair, and we were just a lot of that. And then when our Cheder days finished, we graduated into our Sunday school as we entered junior high and so on. So we kept up our Yiddish education. We studied Yiddish as well as Hebrew. Celebrated all the holidays and so on. Our Rabbi David Spiral Shalom, was with us for 54 years before he retired. He was a peer of my parents, so growing up, we all grew up with our children and so on. And I was very active in Young Judea. We started our leadership role as Madrichim at the age of 14. And we had Camp Kadima, which is the only Jewish camp east of Montreal, I believe, 6 weeks. And it's gathered a reputation, started in the 1940s. And that's how we met everybody from our area. And Moncton, St. John, and Fredericton, kind of in a triangle, very close to one another. We used to have Judean Tri-City meets. And through Young Judea, we traveled. I remember a Kinus in Kenora, Ontario, on by train, where students, other Judeans traveled from Halifax, picked everybody up through St. John and Moncton on the stop, and we met the other children coming through onto, Montreal and Toronto, and then made our way almost to Winnipeg, but not quite. But I've been very active in terms of Zionistic activities, Soviet Jewry, a member of Hadassah Witzo, Canada, and I was served on the executive of that. I found in a small Jewish community, if you want to maintain Yiddishkeit, you have to look outside your community to reach and to explore what the ties are and to meet other people who have the same background. You can go to a service in Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, wherever, Vancouver. You can go to Israel and you can go to a shul service. You can go to European synagogues and go to shul services and sit down. You all have the same language. It's common. You're familiar with everything. So I've been active, like with Soviet Jewry I mentioned. We've been active here with our local anti-Semitism committee, which I co-chair. We started about 5 years ago, and that's proved to be very fruitful for us. I was active on the anti-racism committee of our municipality, which was instrumental in getting the IRA definition passed at that level. We were just generally very active in that sense and so on. I was the first female president of the synagogue, School of Israel Synagogue here in Fredericton. That under my tenure, we had women become participants and part of the minyan. If you didn't have enough men, why should we be penalized if we have women who come to services?
Right.
So let's be inclusive. And
Marilyn, let me jump
over,
in. Let me jump in for a second because again,
sure.
we're going to cover a lot of this throughout the podcast. I think it's magnificent what all three of you are doing and what you've accomplished, and God willing will accomplish. And I have a question having to do with that in one moment. First, I want to say that Fredericton is the capital of New Brunswick in eastern Canada on the St. John's River. It's known for its historical garrison district. Its population is 63,000, and it's home to the largest concentration of knowledge-based businesses in the province. Is one of the fastest-growing cities in Atlantic Canada. Heidi and Kamloops, why do you do what you do as a Jew, as a member of the Jewish community? Why do you ensconce yourself so much in the community?
Yeah, good question. I didn't even think about it as a choice. There's no choice. I mean, I looked for community. I knew when I got here that there's a university and a hospital, so there's got to be Jews. I found Jewish doctors and Jewish professors. I feel comfortable with people from my community. We have shared experiences. I mean, I've got, of course, multicultural friends from all communities across Canada, but it's important for me because if not, it'll just disappear, right? It'll disappear, especially in a town that's small. There's not that many men and women who are both Jewish. There's a lot of intermarriage, and then so that just dwindles down. And it's just really important to keep this community alive, and they've been alive way before I got here, and people have come and gone and left, but it's just I don't know, it's not a duty, it's just what we do. I didn't even think it was a choice.
Howard, how would you answer that same question? Why have you devoted yourself so much to the Jewish community?
When I was young, and barely a teenager, the Jewish kids couldn't do a lot of things. And there was a golf club that the Jewish adults couldn't belong to, a social club that they couldn't belong to, a yacht club. In small towns growing up throughout Canada, the expression "Schwer zu sein a Yid" came to be in practice. Tough to be a Jew.
Tough to be a Jew.
You have to struggle in order to assert your identity. And in a small community like St. Catharines, the way in which everybody came together was there was a Jewish community center, and there were cheder classes 5 days a week, including the Sunday. There was a library. There was after school things. There was Young Judea. There was B'nai B'rith. There was Hadassah. The Jewish community became a unit unto its own. And I have always been a community builder. I was a leader in Young Judea. I was a leader in the synagogue from the time I was a newlywed practically. And my first my first run at being a president was almost 40 years ago now. And if we stop doing this, what happens to the idea of Jewish continuity? I said yesterday from the Bima that we are now poised the same way my grandparents' generation was. As business picked up and people moved to the community, they found a Jewish community. And it is my hope, because of where we are geopolitically, that maybe we will continue to grow again. People are leaving the big cities. They're looking for ways in which they can identify and find community, and we already have that. So I do what I do because I believe in Jewish continuity.
Marilyn, why have you decided that the Jewish community would be your thing, that you've involved yourself to such an extent as you have?
I've had opportunities to actually go into non-Jewish organizations and so on. And I think it's inherent, something from within. And I'm starting to get emotional.
No, that's okay.
It was instilled in me,
By your
I
parents.
think, by my parents, and wanting to have that for my children and future grandchildren and generations. And I think we can see how the secular aspect of Judaism has just eroded to such an extent. You know, if you were to ask someone today, you know, how do you identify as a Jew? I mean, we have, as Howard was saying, 450 people, according to the last census, who identified as being Jewish, but we don't see them. We have people come into the community, or maybe students who want to get away from home and so on, don't identify, they don't want to be involved with the Jewish community. So we have to be innovative in order to attract, in order to reach out to students, to other people. It's a great place, Fredericton, for retirees if people want to come. We've reopened our immigration program, which we tried a few years ago, and they closed down the provincial nominee program. I believe it was 2015. So we've got that rolling again. And our community has changed from the, Russian, Polish, Ashkenazi base. We now have more Mizrahi. We have European, from and those from Israel, Mideastern, and so on. So it's multi-mix and trying to integrate all these individuals and try to reach and be something and give something to those who will be able to identify with their Judaism, with the ethnicity and the culture.
Marilyn, what about this discussion or your response makes you so emotional?
It's the shrinking of the Jewish population.
Yes.
And trying to bring back those who have kind of left the fold. How do we maintain that?
So Heidi, thank you for responding. Heidi, within that context, I live in Toronto, and when I walk outside my door, I am 5 to 10 minutes away from 6 or 7 or 8 different shuls and synagogues and temples. The idea of building the Jewish community in Toronto, it's anathema to most of us. That's not what we do. We put ourselves in the middle of it. If I want to learn Torah, I will go to a shiur down the street. If I want to attend a Holocaust memorial, I'm right minutes away from Earl Bales Park, where they have the Holocaust memorial. But in Kamloops, as Marilyn was talking about, you're not only maintaining the Jewish community, but you're trying to build it as well. Would that be correct? Trying to bring Jews into the headquarters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wear my Judaism, front and center. I had to join, let's say, Rotary here in Kamloops as part of my job of being the CEO of the foundation. So when they're doing little things like, happy bucks or something, I'll talk about, the pushka or doing a mitzvah, and people love it. They've asked me to speak at adult learners for the general population. And with that, I get calls and someone will say to me, my grandmother was Jewish and my mother wasn't raised. Like, they give me all their stories.
Yes.
And then I'll say, well, you're Jewish. And just 2 nights ago, I was at a dinner where a woman who I've known for a while told me that her maiden name is Pinder Moss, and the family name was Moss, but then they were worried that they'd be identified as Jews when they came to Canada, so they add this Pinder to it. And I just said, Jill, you never mentioned that. So many people have come to let me know. So by being present, and we join film festivals, and we have all kinds of public things. We have yet to light the big menorah or Chanukiah down at City Hall, but we can do it. People have come forward, and we're just trying to show them. So come to an activity and see what we're doing. This is how your grandparents lived, or their parents. So yeah, it's important. And then we also have a whole new phase of it. We have a law school at Thompson Rivers University, and there's a lot of Jewish students coming from Toronto and Vancouver across Canada. I think it's the newest law school. So suddenly we have all these small this small community of Jewish students, growing. And so I reached out to Vancouver to get a Hillel going or something, because they need help on campus, especially with what's going on since post October 7th. So we're building, it's incredible. We're building here, so.
Well, when you were, how many folks are you talking about who do what you do?
Well, you gave that census, but I would say we're about 20 strong that are involved and doing things, from students. And then there's this outreach. People live a little bit more rurally. We have some hippie Jews that went and did some farming and come in, some Jews who've intermarried with the indigenous community. So that's kind of cool. But when we have a Passover Seder, we have 60 people, and so that's, I don't know, for me, that's kind of, big for Kamloops, of course. And, but we have about 20 ongoing committed people that are building with me. I'm not doing it alone, for sure. Yeah.
Right. No, I understand that. And what's beautiful too is you give people credit for their work, and inevitably you can't do it on your own, because despite your population of Jews, it's just way too much.
Yeah, and I do have a full-time job, but I have a teaching background. So when we went up to the university one year to do a Passover Seder, I worked with the culinary school there, and I taught them, about Passover and the different foods that we eat. And I sent them on a mission to go find, if they were making charoset, what that meant. And then I used some of the students, Jewish students, to say, okay, let's find a place, let's book it, let's do, so. And then we have this new rabbi, a Chabad rabbi who's coming into town because that's what they do, and trying to do some education. And they're thinking of sending a couple, a man, a husband and wife here. And we don't have a synagogue. It's kind of easier when Chabad moves to a place with a synagogue or not. So we'll see if that pans out, but that would be different. That would be, more Orthodox, obviously. But for those who are interested, they're doing courses online, etc.
Howard, October 7th came, and it was a terrible, terrible day for the Jewish people and for so much of the world. Here in Toronto, I actually led services at a local synagogue called Congregation Habonim. And it was the Jewish holiday. And I was surrounded by many, many people. And I came home, and my village was vast. I was in touch with all my friends and all my family, and reached out the best way I could, the way that I know how to do, on social media and through my podcast. There was no lack of support, and our village is huge. What was it like in St. Catharines on October 7th and afterward?
We had a lot of people in the community that reached out, and all kinds of personal and professional, through my own email address or through the synagogue. It was very difficult for a while to keep up with all of the messages that were coming, because I don't believe in a 1-word or 2-word response to somebody. I go on a little bit more, and because I am a community builder, and it was just a giant set of arms pulling us in St. Catharines, uniquely because there is a very active Chabad community. The Chabad rabbi came to St. Catharines because of Niagara Falls. And Niagara Falls, if you come to Niagara Falls during Sukkot, or you come to Niagara Falls during the summer, you'd be amazed at the number of Orthodox
Yes.
Jews, and I mean visibly Orthodox, dressed that way and walking that way, and large numbers of families. The Chabad rabbi has become very prominent, in some cases too prominent. And at the beginning, they took over. There was no room for Congregation B'nai Israel because we were a conservative, big tent shul, but women sat together, and we were in St. Catharines. The Chabad rabbi wouldn't even call it St. Catharines because it's a saint. And but last, I guess it was now maybe a couple of months ago, because the Chabad community was having so much trouble finding a space at Brock University, because like all the universities, they had struggles over Arab population and there's Jewish student and professional population. They came to us, and the Chabad rabbi's wife said, who's working on her PhD, she said that we are one community, and I said yes. And my grandparents made sure we had a Jewish community center, and that means for everybody. And we have kept that. We have kept our kitchens glatt kosher. We we don't even allow. We're having a gala 100th anniversary weekend, the weekend of June 20th to 22nd, and we're having a Friday night dinner. But I made an executive decision that it just won't be chicken. It'll be a fish dinner, because that way we can keep everything parav or milchik, and it makes it much easier for the synagogue. But I told the Chabad rabbi, everything is kosher. They can use our kitchens if they want, and hopefully that was a foot in the door, and we're going to become stronger, because the
Good for
only
you.
way we're going to deal with this is being Yisrael Chai, Yisrael.
Very good. Marilyn, October 7th came, and we've traveled a few miles since then, but things have been very difficult. In Fredericton, do you have a mezuzah on your front door? Would you wear a Magen David outwardly?
We would, yes, we do. We would. My granddaughter just spent her March break she lives here in Fredericton. She's in high school, grade 12. Just spent her March break in Toronto with friends that she knows from camp. And they'll be seeing each other this summer. She said, I've never seen so many Jews in one place in my life, and they're all wearing their kippas, and they're all wearing their Magen Davids. She was, culture shock, coming from here. She's a student of 2,500 in her high school, and very few Jewish students. We we were affected by the vigil on October the 7th. We had relatives in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. By the grace of God, they were rescued by the IDF. I think it was about 26, 28 hours after everything had started. Fortunately, they were not injured, and they moved further north, were moved further north in Israel. It affected the community, and we had invited the public to the synagogue to address the issue and give them an update. It was well attended, and we had personal stories from people who had either just been to Israel and returned, or who knew someone in Israel, had been in contact with, or whatever, and able to, present what the facts are. And as we said, we're all witnesses to this. It's nothing for denial, misinformation, or disinformation. You can't deny. And we have commemorated this in the 2 years after with the public vigil in front of the legislature. We had a good Israeli turnout of the Israelis who have immigrated here. And the connection is very strong, very strong.
Heidi, have
We've
you?
had
Thank you. Have you
Sorry.
experienced anti-Semitism as your community?
Yeah, for sure. There was some, right away, there was posters put up downtown on, on some of the poles about, free Hamas, free Gaza. And we would write, sometimes we go with our Sharpies from Hamas. There was a small little group on campus. But the interesting, there wasn't a lot. I just want to say there wasn't a lot. I just wanted to say one thing that was so unusual. I just want to say when it happened is we had a student here from the Thompson River University, not a Jewish student, from Toronto, and she was dating an Israeli whose grandmother was killed on Kibbutz Be'eri, and he was visiting her when this happened. And so we had Anderson Cooper calling him from CNN because, they had sent the family footage from her cell phone. So it was just like bringing it right here. But, I'll tell you I had worked very closely with the Muslim community here when we brought some Syrian refugees with this group called RAFT, Refugees and Friends Together. And I had spoken so I got to know this Muslim community very closely when we worked together, and it was beautiful for me. This is way before October 7th, just working and bringing the Syrian refugees here. And then I spoke on the radio and TV station, and I said, your Jewish friends are hurting. If you don't know what to say, just call them and say, what happened on October 7th was terrible. And I got a lot of emails after that, and some of my other friends we didn't know what to say. We didn't know what to say, but I didn't get a call from the Muslim community, someone I had worked very closely with. And that was a bit upsetting. And so I called them and I just said, this is just right after October 7th. And I said, we worked together and we did so much together. I'm just a bit surprised that you haven't called me to say, I'm so sorry, or what's going on is terrible. Not, I'm so sorry, he didn't do anything. And then he just said something about, October 7th, but a lot, Israel started this way before, and this is an accumulation. And I just said, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk to you. And I hung up, and I haven't spoken to them since. And that was really surprising because there were so many other people who called me, East Indian, Asian, just to say, I'm so sorry this happened. What a crazy, fearful, insane day, and what happened after. And I was very sad that I didn't get a lot of outreach to me from a community that I had worked very closely with to bring Syrian refugees. So I'm not saying everybody, but the core group, and that still hurts me to today. Years later.
Howard, were there instances of anti-Semitism in St. Catharines after October 7th?
No, there weren't any. There haven't been any overt expressions of anti-Semitism. There were a couple of demonstrations early on. The Muslim community, because there's Brock University, and there are a lot of more assimilated Muslims that are coming and starting up businesses and everything. We've not had a close relationship with the mosque, even though we can walk from our shul to their mosque it's like 3 blocks away, and the only overt signs of any anti-Semitism was not long after October the 7th. There were swastikas on the posts, the light posts in front of the synagogue. But we happened to be in the middle of the most distressed part of the city, where, like, right across the street from the synagogue is the Salvation Army, and on the other side of the street is Start Me Up Niagara, and places where the homeless would gather. And as I explained to the gal on my board who who interfaces with the Niagara Regional Police, single swastikas on lampposts once, one event, that's somebody equivalent of walking down the street and saying F you.
Yes.
You know, like the giving us the finger, because they don't know what that really means. The young people today don't know what that swastika is. They only know that it's antagonistic of society, that it indicates that they're annoyed in some way. Uh, we still have not had any problems, and we bite our tongue and we thank God that we haven't had to deal with anything. The only problem was Chabad trying to find space at Brock University. They had quite a struggle, but in the end, the faculty voted down an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish resolution, which was quite, because everywhere else they were those kinds of resolutions were accepted.
Marilyn, I think for the viewers who are in the major metropolitan cities across Canada and the United States, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, New York, I have many listeners and viewers throughout. I think some people are going to be surprised that your responses, all three of you, were not, yes, there was a plethora of anti-Semitic acts, but you're not saying that. You're saying, yes, there were some. We had to deal with some nonsense. Our relationship with the Muslim community is not so good anymore. Marilyn, would you argue then that much of that is because of the outreach you have done to the non-Jewish community?
I think to a degree it has been. I know that the Muslim community in Moncton, the Ahmadiyya group, had sponsored a peace conference last November. Myself and another individual had attended that. You would see markings on a walking path. We would report it to the city. They would get out there and, sponge it off. If this, we did have an incident where the synagogue was, windows were broken, International Holocaust Day. But I mean, people will investigate, and it's left as a question mark. It's easy to assume that this is anti-Semitic, and I'm an individual. I don't jump to that conclusion. You may think, but let's an investigation occur, and let's follow it through, and let's do due diligence. And I think that's the proper way to go to it, because immediately if you say this is anti-Semitic and that is, it's like the boy crying wolf all the time. And if something proves that there is an incident and it's not anti-Semitic, but maybe it was done for other reasons, or by other individuals, you're kind of caught with the egg on the face. There has been, like, we had weekly protests. No doubt the year that there were campus protests and so on, impacted, I think, the community to a degree. You're quick to jump when you see a speaker come in on campus. This is an anti-Semitic speaker, just from the historical perspective that they have. You have to be diligent, and it has to be grassroots. It has to be grassroots, and you have to start pulling in and educating and building the bridges with the allies. Has proven to be, I think, impactful in terms of being good for us. I mean, when this October 7th, we had the mayor step in and offer condolences to the community. We had many leaders from different clergy offer condolences to the community. So, I mean, it works both ways. There has to be the give and take and goodwill. I mean, I myself have been to the mosque a couple of times. I don't think, maybe other than our Rabbi Goldman, there's been anyone else really who's attended the mosque. Being involved in interfaith dialogue, interfaith groups, you have to work on it. It's not going to appear to you out of nowhere. You have to work on it, and it's a continuous journey.
Are you ever afraid to be a Jew, Marilyn?
No.
Like to show it
When
outwardly,
I was when I was 16, I remember going to Halifax for a Judean conference, and I remember at the airport there were Canadian UN troops who had just returned from the Middle East, and I was on the phone arranging, my pickup and so on. And after I hung up, one of the servicemen approached me and he said, I overheard your conversation. Are you Jewish? And I said, yes. And he said, well, we just came back from Cyprus and we encountered Jews there, and you certainly don't look like the Jews like that were over there.
Yes.
Bit different from the way that we dress, I suppose, and so on. So, I sat recently, it was a couple of years ago, at a conference the Israeli Foundation had presented for Holocaust studies for educators. I'm a retired public school educator, and I was sitting beside a woman, and we were talking about, she works with this colleague, and how do you know someone's Jewish, and this, that, and the other thing, and I said, well, I'm Jewish, after about 15 minutes, conversation. She, well, there you go. I never would have known, unless you told me.
Right.
So,
Right.
I think if I walked in to address a group, the first question I would say is, what is a Jew, and how many people here are Jewish? See how many hands go up. Okay, what's the difference?
Mhm.
What is the difference between
Very
us?
good. Very good. Heidi, just a little bit about the Jewish community across Canada in general. Victoria, BC has a Jewish population of 2,000, non-Jewish population of 360,000. Halifax, the population is 1,500 with an overall population of 430,000. In Saskatoon, there are 500 Jews with an overall population of 330,000. And in Thunder Bay, Ontario, there's a Jewish population of 300 with an overall population of 110,000. Chatham, Kent, Ontario, there are 150 Jews with 100,000 people overall. Heidi, the relationship between the Toronto Jewish community and major metropolitan Jewish communities and Israel is generally very, very strong. And there are programs that one can attend on probably every given day of the week. Align yourself with Israel through infinite, almost, amount of programs and projects. What is the relationship between your community, your Jewish community, and Israel?
Well, we get thankful for Perry. We have the small Jewish communities. In the past, we've sent students to Washington to go to some programming that would hopefully lead them to going to Israel, like Birthright. We've had some Jewish kids here go to Birthright. A lot of people here have been, some have never been. We have a nice, actually, connection with some of the Catholic and Italian Catholic community that feels very strong that they would like to go to Israel. So one day we're hoping to plan, this multicultural tour when, who knows when, but soon, hopefully. And we work closely now with Vancouver to make sure, our community has strong connections there. A lot of the Jewish people here have lived in Vancouver or came from other cities across Canada as well. So that is, the goal, is always to try and stay connected, do programming, invite people to come. Whenever there's a few Israeli professors that are studying here, teaching here, and that's always interesting. We have small Hebrew classrooms, like people who want to, not classrooms, but classes. So I think that the connection is really strong, and hopefully we would love to go on one of these trips together with other small Jewish communities across Canada. And there's a lot of fascination with Israel. As I said before, I taught an adult learners class, not Jewish, and there's so many non-Jewish people who've been to Israel on so many tours. So Israel is spoken about quite a bit, and the goal is to get a nice trip from Kamloops strong to Israel.
Howard, same question addressed to your community in St. Catharines Jewish community, having to do with your relationship with Israel. How does that play out?
St. Catharines has been a Zionist community since almost the beginning. There were several prominent members of our Jewish community who moved to take up positions with the World Zionist Congress, Israel, and there are a lot of families who have families there. I have a son and a brother that live there, close friends, the son that lives there. The St. Catharines Jewish community, because of young Judea and because of our proximity to Toronto, there are now an increasing number of seniors who are coming who are much more strongly identified. And that identification includes identification with the state of Israel. We now end our services on Shabbat singing Hatikva. We began that after October the 7th, and we continue to do that. Not one person ever says, "Why are we doing that?" So there's and Young Judea was very strong, and then after that, USY was very strong, and there's always been a very strong connection. Our part-time rabbi has grandchildren in Israel and a brother that lives in Israel, so the kesher, the connection is there.
Kol hakavod. Marilyn, I remember growing up in Kitchener. I left when I was 13 to come to yeshiva in Toronto, and I've basically been here most of my life other than living a little bit of time in Israel. And I remember the vibrancy of the community because my parents were incredible leaders. God bless their souls. But I also remember sometimes a certain amount of loneliness, and wanting to be more so part of the larger Jewish communities, because I found, and I think my sisters would probably concur, that when you're part of a smaller community, it can get quiet sometimes. You don't have the Jewish press around you. You don't have Jewish emissaries and leadership necessarily around you, as one might have in New York City or in Paris or in Toronto. With that, I'm just curious, is there a relationship that Fredericton has, the Jewish community there, with Toronto, with Montreal, with Vancouver? Is there a real move towards, listen, let's support our brothers and sisters in smaller cities and towns who are doing an incredible job of maintaining and building the Jewish community? We should really perhaps partner with them. Are there those efforts that are made?
I think
Be honest.
through, yeah, it depends who's at the top of the ticket.
Yes.
No, I believe, for some of us who have been involved in national organizations like CJA, Hadassah Witzo, Young Judea, JFC-UIA, JNF, our networking is broad. We've mentioned Perry, and he's been very instrumental in the Small Jewish Communities Forum, where we get to, network with one another. Through CJA, I've gotten to network with other individuals, and, we keep in touch, we keep each other updated, and so on. We share. I had a youth symposium last year, which I did with St. John Moncton and Fredericton. We hosted it here. We brought in Allied Voices to speak, to do a 5-hour session, because we need our youth educated so they can handle themselves amidst all this anti-Semitism within the schools. We keep abreast of what people are doing in Toronto. We can do it here on a smaller scale. Some of the things we've been very active and positive in letter writing to MLAs, MPs. Perhaps in a smaller community, we may have an advantage there in terms of being able to work with our government representatives more so than people in larger communities. here you walk on the street, you see somebody, hi, how are you? You know people by
Yes.
name, and that's an advantage in the small community.
Heidi, I believe very, very strongly that there needs to be a lot of achdus, a lot of unity amongst the Jewish people, and that includes the diaspora and Israel. And I've always thought that there might be a great program that should be actualized through the larger Jewish communities, and that is to partner up with the Kamloops Jewish community, with St. Catharines Jewish community, with Fredericton. What does that mean? That means like when you drive into Thornhill, you'll see Thornhill is a partner with, I think it's a lot or something along those lines. That there's
twinning.
Yeah, twinning, that there's Jewish community members going out to Kamloops and being part of what you do, sharing our resources and so on. Now, I don't think that exists on a formal level. Everybody keeps mentioning Perry Romberg, who's a part of the UIA, the Jewish Federation of Greater Toronto. And indeed, he does a magnificent job, and kol hakavod to him. But would you say that there is any of that or enough of that, the twinning larger Jewish communities?
Well, I do it myself and anybody else who knows people in other cities, in other Jewish cities. So when I moved here, because I had worked for UJA in Ottawa, I was the campaign director, and I have friends all over Canada, especially Montreal and Toronto. I'll call, whether it's Seth Rosensweig, who's now living in Vancouver, but he helped my son do a bar mitzvah. He studied over the internet, and then we went to Toronto. We actually had it there because that's where my parents were living. So I think if I have to call Tommy Bellman, who's a friend of mine who plays at the Habonim synagogue with Ellie Rubenstein,
Yes.
Tommy, come and do a Shabbaton here. So we sort of do that ourselves, and everyone's open to do that. But I love the idea that if you're driving through Thornhill, it could say city twinned with the Jewish community of Kamloops. So Avrum, let's get it done. I think that's a great idea. And I do pull people from Vancouver, people I know from Montreal. I have, cousins in Israel. So whatever we can, we do. And I have cousins in LA that we try and, organize some things for. So it would be nice. It would be great if Torontonians would come to Kamloops and do a Shabbaton here or something fun.
Yes.
So good idea, Avrum. I'm going to call you after.
Fair enough. Now, Howard, basically what Heidi is saying is that there's a lot of outreach coming from Kamloops, and I'm assuming from your Jewish community. But is there inreach? Are the larger Jewish communities in touch with you?
The problem now is that we benefited for a long time by being close to Toronto, and I had a close relationship with all of the field workers, JNF and UJA and the JFed, all of them. They would all call and say, Howard, we're having a guest speaker come and we're taking them around. Let's get a date. So I would be the one that was bringing all these people in. But there was a lot of fundraising, and there were funds going from St. Catharines to the national organizations. There's very little left now in St. Catharines aside from what I pull out for the synagogue. The rest of it is not there, and so JFed that and CJA that Perry works so closely with, they're struggling with how do they provide the needs of the Jews in the small communities when the money is not coming in to the center that can be used to go back out to the hinterland. And of course, I'm getting too old to go chasing after all of the organizations. So it's very sad, but it's a part of the phase that we're going through. That's why I'm hoping. I have now had the synagogue declared a historical site. I have groups that are phoning up wanting to come and see the synagogue when people want to rent a facility, and we do have people call. I'm encouraging including a tour of the synagogue and an explanation of what we have here and so on. I'm working very closely with the consultant from the District School Board of Niagara on the Holocaust curriculum expectations that are in the junior and intermediate curriculum. And I have high school groups coming from all of the Catholic secondary schools. So, you do as much as you can. And wherever you have an opportunity or an opening, I grew up with a grandfather that always said, if you're going to open the door for me, I'm going through it. And that's the way I am.
Yeah, kol hakavod to all of you. I want. Did you want to say
Yeah, I
something?
just wanted to say that there's a foundation in Vancouver. You probably know about it, the Ronald Rodberg, S. Rodberg, Mark Gervis, who used to be at Vancouver Federation. He runs it, and they want to give money to small Jewish communities to, strengthen them. So it's not just asking the Jewish community to give money to Federation or to give to Israel. Now they're recognizing that we need help here. So as I'm doing this, from the corner of my desk, because I have a full-time job, but I would love to get some funding to help some of the students who are going to keep our website up and alive and post and stuff. So that's wonderful that that foundation exists.
I think that just adding to the idea that we put out there a few minutes ago about aligning the smaller Jewish community with the larger ones, there are a lot of very large synagogues here in Toronto, temples and shuls, some of which are having a very difficult time getting people into the pews on Shabbat and the holidays. And I think there would be nothing nicer than to align a synagogue or Adat Israel or the Bayit Synagogue up on Clark Street with Kamloops, with St. Catharines, with Fredericton. Yeah. And I think it's probably a very viable idea. Now, in conclusion, Marilyn, I am verklempt. I'm really verklempt at this interview. I am, because of you and your colleagues, Howard and Heidi, because it's magnificent what you do. And your sense of loyalty and commitment to your Jewish community, to the Jewish people, to Israel, and to the broader world is so unique to where you are in the world, in Fredericton. It could only happen the way you do it because of where you are. Like I said at the top of the interview, if you don't do it, man, ain't no one going to be there to do it. So I want to give you accolades, and I want to tell you how incredibly proud that I am of each and every one of you. And Marilyn specifically, I just want to say that, your emotion throughout this interview, I felt it here in Toronto. And I just want to thank you for your commitment to our people, because it's extraordinary. Just very simple terms, it's very clear you're proud to be a Jew. That would be accurate, wouldn't it?
Very much so. And if I could just say that we started this local grassroots anti-Semitism committee.
Yes,
which exists about nine people now. We started with 10, we have 9. And within 5 years, we had changes to the high school Holocaust education curriculum, to the anti-racism task force here in a municipality. We've had established a Holocaust mobile education exhibit, which the Department of Education has adapted, put into French and English, and is placed in different school districts across the province. We have established the Atlantic Holocaust Education Foundation. And 2 of our members, Jasmine Cranit and Larry Finkelman, have partnered and put together a book on anti-Semitism, a teacher's guide. And within 5 years, we've probably done or felt we've accomplished or achieved more than maybe some organizations have set out to do, because you can go through bureaucratic red tape, but where there's a will, there's the drive, and we are the sustainers and we are the doers.
Big hugs to you.
We're
Big
based on
hugs
volunteers, and that's what it is.
Heidi, do you ever, in the wee hours of the night, when we're all kind of introspective, looking at ourselves as human beings, as Jews, are you ever in awe? Do you pat yourself on the back for what you're accomplishing for the Jewish people?
Well, I know I feel like sometimes if I don't do it at the beginning a while ago, we wouldn't get the Seder, Passover Seder. But now I see that I've connected, and made it interesting and getting the kids, the students involved and the younger ones. So I feel happy that I'm keeping that going. And thankfully I have David Kramer and his wife Ali. They have a son Zach who's studying in Israel, and so they're helping. So I do feel it's important. It's good for my, your soul, your neshama, to know that you got to work on this. When I was just in Berlin in October, and we went on Rosh Hashanah. We were in a small synagogue in Berlin, and I just felt like, wow, we were doing the services there with my friend Naomi from Toronto, and I just felt like, from Kamloops to Berlin, and doing it, just like keeping the tradition going. I don't know, it does sit with me well, and I have a good night's sleep from that. So
good. Howard, are you proud of yourself for your work?
I'm not the kind of person that normally gives myself a pat on the back, but I get a lot of issues, a lot of COVID from the members of my community who are very proud of what we've accomplished as a community. And I get a lot of that from the non-Jewish community as well, who see my leadership and acknowledge it. So, and I had something very, very gratifying just last week.
Yes.
When I found out that someone who was born and raised in St. Catharines, parents were proud members of our congregation, she's retiring and leaving Toronto and moving back to St. Catharines with her husband. And I thought to myself, yes, somebody young,
Yes.
somebody younger, somebody who has a very strong Jewish identity. And when we opened our year of celebrating the synagogue last August, we had a gala concert with our rabbi, Moshe Merovich, our part-time rabbi, and 3 cantors. He got 3 friends from Toronto. And then we had a reception afterwards, and everybody was floating because like old home week. And everybody just, was, oh, I haven't seen you in so long, and I haven't seen that connection that I am a Jew and this is where my roots are, and I am proud of where I've come from. That meant a great deal.
Highly inspiring. Last question, folks. Marilyn, if there's one thing that you would like listeners to hear most from this interview, what might it be?
We all have a job to do as individuals for the betterment of the collective. And we should all be proud to be Jewish and not hide our Jewishness, but be proud of it out in public.
Heidi, what's the one thing you want people to hear?
That it being together and working together to promote, that old peace and love is actually what's going to make this world better in some very, very difficult times now. And I feel, really good when people meet me and they tell me I'm the first Jewish person they've met, and that's like deep in the interior, and they have a great experience and they're loving, and that's great. I just want to spread that, but also to make sure we continue on as people. I'm doing it for my grandparents, my son too. So together.
Howard, what's the one thing you'd like people to take away from this?
100 years ago, when our grandparents all came to the New World, they came with next to nothing on their backs, but nothing besides what was on their backs. And they found their way. Marilyn's grandparents, my grandparents, found their way to small Jewish communities where there were only a handful of people. and look at what they accomplished. And we're in the same position. We can, through our own pride, our own sense of community, continue that chain. I constantly say from the Bima, Midor Lador, from generation to generation, we each of us are a light in a chain of light.
I've been working with AI over the last few months, having it create poems about my guests, and I've done that today. And I'd like to read a poem, and it's called "Ode to the Small Jewish Communities of Canada." In the heart of Canada's vast, wide land, 3 cities stand, their stories grand: Kamloops, St. Catharines, and Fredericton, where Jewish hearts have long begun. In Kamloops, where mountains kiss the sky, a community that's high, with roots deep in the soil, they've built a home, a place to gather where no soul roams alone. Their synagogue stands a beacon of light, a testament of faith in day and in night. In St. Catharines, by the shores of the lake, where the wine flows and traditions awake, a place of warmth, of celebration and song, where Jewish hands for generations belong. Here the history blends with the present day's cheer, a welcoming embrace to all those who are near. And in Fredericton, with its river so wide, holds a community with deep, unwavering pride. In the Maritimes, where the waters run free, the Jewish spirit shines for all to see. Though small in numbers, their hearts are bold, their stories of resilience quietly told. Through these cities, where their diverse sound, Jewish voices rise. They are strong and they are profound. They carry traditions old yet ever new, a testament to a culture that's vibrant and true. In Kamloops, in St. Catharines, in Fredericton, they're embraced. The Jewish communities find their place.
Beautiful.
Was there a mistake in there? Was there a mistake? Is there a shul in Kamloops?
No, I was going to say there's no
not,
shul.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you guys daven? Where do you daven?
So we don't daven as much. We do it in people's homes for Shabbat but we have been asked if we want to use like a church on Saturday, but we've found halls that are non-denominational.
Very good.
Just like, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank my guest today and profusely. I've done many interviews in my life, and this has got to be one of my favorites because, as I said, I have a special place in my heart for all of you and for your community members. And I really encourage the larger Jewish communities to go outside of ourselves, to look past what exists in our metropolitan cities, and to take a look at the committed Jews across this beautiful country. And just to hear within this interview what my 3 guests today have accomplished in their smaller cities, in their smaller Jewish communities. It is truly miraculous what you have done. And my heart goes out to you. And I know that many of my listeners, many of my viewers will feel the same way. So I'd just like to say, kol hakavod, extend to you a big Avrum burly hug, Jewish, and tell you thank you so much. And I'd also like to come to your community at some point in time. I would love to join you and speak there and perhaps do some interviews with your members and get a much better sense on the ground, as they say, of who you are. So kol hakavod, Am Yisrael Chai, be proud to be Jewish. And until we meet again, I want to thank my listeners and viewers. Please feel free to ask me any questions at avrum.rosensweig@gmail.com. And if you would like to get together with our brothers and sisters here on the show, you can be in touch with me and I will forward your messages to them. Until then, sei gesinnt, like we say in Yiddish. Anyone here speak Yiddish?
Sei gesinnt, yeah. Not as well as Marilyn and Howard, but yeah.
Seid gesinnt, and we will see you again soon. Am Yisrael Chai.